Hi, I'm Jonathan Weinberg, and this is Drawing with Fountain Pens. Today I'm going to talk about a pen or a series of pens that are called the Pelikan Graphos. Here is one of them. These are pens, they're not exactly fountain pens. They were developed for architects and calligraphers, technical pens, I guess is what you would call it. Today, an equivalent might be more like a rapidograph. This is a pen that has intrigued me. You can see that it has a very unusual nib, and it does feed the nib with ink. So I suppose, I think I would count this as a fountain pen, but maybe a more proper term for it would be technical pen. So I'm going to talk about, about the history of this pen and how it works. I don't really have a huge amount of experience with it. I was just so intrigued by the nibs and boxes that you would see on eBay. There are a few websites and YouTube videos that talk about it, but surprisingly, given the fact that it was used by so many people over the years, it's surprising how little information there is about this pen. Now, if you find this video fascinating and interesting, don't forget to subscribe. It's the way to support the channel, and it doesn't cost you anything. What I'm going to do, as always, is I will use the pen a little bit and do a drawing with it, keeping in mind that this is not a pen that you would use really for journaling or writing, although some of the different nibs that come with it would work well with certain kinds of calligraphy. Now, if you see one of these boxes, this is a sort of a deluxe box of the Graphos pen and all the kinds of nibs that come with the pen. I think you can see why I was so intrigued. I mean, look at some of these for doing really thick signs or all kinds of different nibs that you would use with a compass, or you would use to make very straight lines. So architects, the design of the nib, you'll notice is that, I wonder if you can see it, but you notice that it's flat here. So when you draw it across a ruler, you can make a very strong line. And you can imagine how architects and working with dip pens, that would be a problem because it would run out of ink. But this barrel feeds ink to the nib, and therefore you can make very, very long lines with it if you're willing to figure out how they work. And everything is very intriguing. Each one of these nibs they're sort of double nibs, and they open up in a really interesting way. So they go like this, and they open up, and they attach the pen in a very odd way. I'm going to go through that. So these pens were developed first, I believe, in 1934, and they were developed by Theodore Kovacs, who should be much better known. Kovacs is actually the person responsible for designing the first piston pens for Pelikan. He was a Hungarian engineer. We know almost nothing about him. It's very frustrating. Various people have tried to do research, and I don't think we even know when he was born and when he died. Interestingly enough, I don't even think there's at least in the United States, there's not a Wikipedia page for him, which surprises me. Somebody should definitely create one for him. There are certainly patents, all kinds of patents that he developed for Pelikan, and he developed this particular supposedly developed this particular writing system. I think there's something like 60 nibs in this box. I think this comes from the 1950s. You can see that this is the actual pen that holds the nibs. And if I open this up, you see this very peculiar holder, and the nibs, I just stuck my finger with this one, and the nibs attach to this holder, and it's not actually the easiest things to get them to fit, but I guess you come to know how to do it. You fit them on here. they also have this feed that goes in like so. It snaps in. When it's out of the holder, you can put ink into it. You can also feed ink to it through this little hole. So here, if you have Pelikan made a little kind of squeeze bottle that you would put ink here through here, you can also use a hypodermic needle to do that. It's not easy to do that, and the other problem is it's kind of hard to know how much ink to put in it because you can't see the ink going in. But I suppose, again, once you get used to this drawing system, you figure it out. You get used to how it works. The other thing that's strange about this drawing system is that once you ink it up, and you get it ready to go, this is with an A nib, is that the top doesn't go over this, right? It posts in the back. And so you've got the ink in it and you can start drawing, but basically you really just use it for that time and then you clean it out. You don't keep using it day after day because there's no way really to keep the ink wet. Now, this system was created to use India ink, waterproof inks. And, that's great. But one should also keep in mind that the way you're supposed to use it is you're supposed to clean it after you use it every time. And I think when you used it, you were also, like in between when you had to go to the bathroom or whatever, you would have like a little stand. And I've seen online, I don't have one, but where you would put this into a little stand, and that's how maybe you would keep it wet so it doesn't dry out. Now in the 70s, Pelikan and Rotring created a kind of relationship. Pelikan bought stock in Rotring, so they really did a lot of things together. And this is the Rotring version of it. Again, you can see it uses all the same nibs. I don't have the bottle of ink that would have come with this. But here you see the Rotring red ring, and there is a change in the pen to some degree. You can open it up and you can see the ink, where the ink goes. I suspect that this is removable, but I couldn't figure out how exactly to remove it. It may be stuck. And this is something you keep in mind. If you can see a lot of these on eBay, that unfortunately, and that's the case here, that probably ink has dried in it. I have not been able to get, in this particular model, been able to get the feed to come out. I think it's also a little bit broken. So that's something that can happen. I mean, these pens don't go for a lot on eBay, actually, but it's something to consider when you're buying a pen, if you can't see it, to see how it works. Originally, the Pelikan version was, I think, originally rubber, and then they moved on to plastic in the 50s. This is plastic. Now, another subsidiary, I don't know if that's the right term, but let's say partner of Pelikan is the East German company Markant. I don't know if that's exactly how you pronounce it. And this is a later version also of the pen. What's cool about this version of the pen, not so much the color, I'm not worried about the brown color, but when you open this up, you see that it has a traditional feed here, a barrel, and you can fill ink into this and see how much ink is in it. And this is looking much more like a rapidograph. So this is a later version of this. You'll notice with this that it comes with this little holder, and that's so that you can attach the pen to a compass and use the pen as a compass. Again, something you might do in an engineer's office or an architect's office. So those are some of the different versions of the pen. The version that I was showing you here is the plastic. This seems to me to be plastic. Later Pelikan version of the pen, which they seemed to make until like 1980. Pelikan was still making these, and you can see online, they're selling all these different nibs. Now, another thing which is kind of strange to me is that because you're in this situation, you want to change nibs, but there's ink in this pen. It's not easy to take the nib off without getting a lot of ink on your hands to put on a new nib. And I suspect that in a lot of architects' offices, if they were using many different nibs, they would have many different holders so that each holder would be sort of designated to a certain nib. So you wouldn't go from taking this nib off and putting another nib on the same holder, but you would have several different holders. I think the holders themselves weren't that expensive, and they sold them later, at least in boxes like this, right? The other thing is that you'll see the nibs coming in these little boxes. So you could buy, different size nibs just alone. So it's very intriguing, all these different nibs. I have friends who do calligraphy, and they sort of are really interested in all the different kinds of nibs, round, straight, etc., etc. So how does this thing write? Well, it depends on the nib. In this case, I have, so this is the Pelikan Graphos, and this is an A6 nib, which Pelikan says is something like I think it's a medium to bold, maybe broad. It's keeping in mind this is not, and it's a ruling nib. It's a nib that is meant to create fine lines and really work with a ruler. I'm using Sailor Kira Guru, I guess, ink, which is a fine pigmented ink, I think with some kind of carbon. It's not quite Indian ink. It's fairly waterproof. And you're getting a very getting a very wet line, a lot of feedback. But actually, as I'm going to show, for drawing, this is not bad. And it reminds me of a lot of a dip pen nib. And it, depending on which way you go, it does have line variation. So left to right, it's pretty thin. Up and down, it's thicker. So you can imagine if you're working with a ruler. Well, you don't have to imagine, I could do it. So if I use it with a ruler, you're getting a very nice fine line. And you can see how a pen like this, because the way it's designed, works really, really well with a ruler. And this is something that won't work as well with most, with most fountain pens, because of the way they are curved. This goes right up against the ruler, and so that works really well for an architect. It also has, you can get more variation if you turn the pen around. You can get really fine line, actually. So I can see how, if you get used to all the other weird things about this system, how it could work really well for drawing. And artists, actually, when they find a tool that they like, often are willing to make all kinds of compromises. The main thing about this pen is that once you ink it up and you use it, you really have to clean it after you're done with it. It's not really, because there's no way to put a top over the nib. You can dip it into a holder of some sort, but you can't put this cap on it. It's not designed for that. I'm not quite sure why that is. I think my suspicion is that if you did have a cap top on it and you had it in your pocket or whatever, is that it puts out so much ink that it would probably, start to leak. But on the other hand, if you're doing a really long line, the dip pen isn't going to work because you're going to run out of ink. So you can see why they came up with this. The thing is that it was supplanted by markers and rapidograph, the rapidograph 2, which I think works better than this for that purpose. How does it write? Well, it's extremely scratchy. It's not meant to be used to write with, in a traditional sense, to journal with. One thing that they tell you in the instructions also is you're not supposed to put any pressure if you want the ink to keep flowing. But it is amazingly wet. And I could see how this could be a very cool drawing tool. Here's a completely different kind of nib that I just sort of dipped in to see how it works. This is an 03.2. You can see it's really thick. It's kind of cool. This is a Z nib. Okay, I started drawing with the pen. I forgot to turn the recording button on. In conclusion, I really enjoyed, playing with these pens and these nibs, but I don't think I would use them long term as drawing for my drawing needs. I think a dip pen makes more sense when you're doing a kind of fine art drawing. Maybe for calligraphy, this would work better. The disadvantage is that it's just not really portable because you have to clean it, and you can't put a top on the nib once you've inked it up. So it's not really meant to be something that you can take on the go, although you can easily move it from one studio to another studio. The whole pleasure of a fountain pen is that you have that ability to use it in different locations. I think having a bunch of different fountain pens, and particularly the so-called Fude nib, I think is gets you some of the advantages of this pen. And then again, as I've said, the dip pen I think works very well, or a set of different rapidographs or markers makes more sense. But this is fun to sort of go back in history, and they're intriguing, and I can see how for some artists this would be really a great choice. Once again, if this was helpful, please do subscribe.